It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening. This is Frank Knight. May I introduce Mr. William Bradford Huey, noted author and analyst, and editor-in-chief of the Longines Chronoscope, and Mr. Hardy Burke, noted author and correspondent. Our distinguished guest for this evening is Dr. Arieh Kubovy, former Israeli minister to Czechoslovakia and Poland.
Dr. Kubovy, our viewers tonight are very much interested, sir, in what's going on in the Russian satellite countries as regards the Jews. And you, with your long experience in satellite nations, are peculiarly well qualified to give us that information. You were ambassador to Czechoslovakia, and I believe after you had left there, the Russian government, in effect, asked the Israeli government not to send you back. Now, sir, specifically, when did you leave Czechoslovakia?
I left Czechoslovakia November the 28th, the day after the end of the Slansky trial.
That's just 2 months ago.
2 months.
And, sir, how long had you been there before you left?
Well, I first want to state that I was minister to Czechoslovakia and Poland, and I spent there 17 months.
And so you were there 17 months. You were there during the Prague trials.
That's right.
You observed the rise of anti-Semitism, and now you have been away from Czechoslovakia just 2 months.
That's right.
Now,
Doctor, is there a pronounced rise of anti-Semitism as you saw it there?
Well, there is no doubt that the Slansky trial was an expression of anti-Semitism.
I see, sir.
now, can you tell us something, sir, as to the extent of anti-Semitism in Czechoslovakia? Specifically, are the Jews living, are they afraid, the Jews who are now in Czechoslovakia? Do they live in terror?
I would say that since the arrest of Slansky and the purge of Jewish officials, which was followed by an ouster of a number of Jews from their economic positions, the Jews have the definite impression that this is a regime directed against them.
That's Jews as Jews, not Jews as political figures.
Not at all, not at all.
Is there
Jews
any
as such.
difference between what's going on in Poland and Czechoslovakia?
The Polish regime has shown more stability as far as its composition is concerned than the Czechoslovak regime. I mean, as far as its ruling class is concerned. But there has remained in Poland, among the Polish population, a very deep-seated anti-Semitism. And those Jews who remained in Poland remained because they could not emigrate in time to Israel, feel that they are in a very dangerous situation.
Doctor, why do, if there is this anti-Semitic feeling there in Poland, why do they want to keep the Jewish people in Poland? Why don't they let them leave if they don't like them? I mean, if that's the idea.
You know that the Soviet Union, as well as all the satellite countries, are in principle opposed to emigration. And they permitted the emigration of Jews for a certain period immediately following the war, while there was still a feeling of guilt, still the feeling that the Jews, after what had happened during the war and the terrible extermination during the war, were entitled to rebuild their lives in a home of their own.
Well, sir.
Doctor, do you see any comparison between the Hitler's persecution of the Jews and what Stalin is doing today? Is there any comparison there?
I would say that anti-Semitism is always a mean, an instrument for certain bigger purposes. And in this respect, I would say there is some identity between all kinds of anti-Semitism.
Well,
Some
sir,
similarity here.
And the Jews are being made a scapegoat again.
Made a scapegoat.
I see.
well, the important thing that you've said now, sir, is that you are not, as an observer of this situation, you make a difference between what's going on in various satellite nations. You don't apply a general statement to what's going on there, sir. Is that correct?
I would, I would say that the recent developments make us very anxious, because if one could be of the opinion that the Prague trial was destined for Czechoslovak purposes in order to find a scapegoat for the economic difficulties of Czechoslovakia, to give the people an explanation why, from the very high standard of living they have known after war, their standard of living now is so low. After what we have seen in Eastern Germany, and after that indictment of the physicians in Moscow, we have every reason to be very anxious and to see there the symptom of a general development.
Pursuing this question a little further that Mr. Huey raised, Doctor, you mentioned a difference of degree in the treatment of the Jewish people in Czechoslovakia and in Poland. Now, to your knowledge, is that difference also a difference of degree in the Soviet Union itself? I mean, within Russia itself? Or would you have any knowledge of that? That difference of degree?
Again, I would not like to speak of the past, because the fate of the Jews in the Soviet Union has passed through great number of phases. What I would like to state is that we are witness now of a very, very disturbing development.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Well, sir, now, can you explain to our viewers why this is happening? Your understanding of Soviet techniques. Is this, number one, is it aimed at, we've heard that it's a tactic for the Middle East, that it is a tactic by which the Soviet Union hopes to attract support among the Arabs. Would you say that that's one of the reasons why this is being done?
Well, I would like to distinguish between various reasons. And I would like you to understand that a trial like the Prague trial is not destined to administer justice. It has a great number of purposes.
It's a tactic,
It's a
isn't it?
tactic, it's a method. It's a method to achieve political purposes. It's also a method to indoctrinate the masses as well as the leaders. Now, let us take a few purposes. The Prague trial, for instance, one of the purposes of the Prague trial was to convince the Czechoslovak people that their present leaders are real Czechs and real Slovaks. They are real patriots. Now, this is a general line which we will develop in all the satellite countries, because it's very important to convince the population that their governments are real national governments. Of course, there are wider implications, there are more general purposes, and I would say, as far as the Soviet Union is concerned, that there is no doubt that this method is destined to win the friendship of those who may be the enemies of Israel and of the Jewish people.
In view of all of this, Doctor, why is it that the government of Israel, realizing that there is this great wave of anti-Jewish propaganda and sentiment that's been set up behind the Iron Curtain, why is it that do they continue to recognize the Soviet Union?
Well, I do not see any purpose in withdrawing our representations from the various countries. Israel is not the only country which has been the object of very violent attacks. And if I may say,
You're referring to the United States of
I
America.
have seen the treatment, for instance, of American diplomats. And I am sure I have considered it an act of courage on the part of the American diplomats to maintain their contacts and their connections in order to serve a higher purpose.
Well, now, sir, our viewers will be particularly interested in what Israel as a state expects to do about this latest development. Now, sir, do you think that it'll be Israeli policy to try to bring as many of these people to Israel as possible?
There is no doubt that this will be our policy. If the Soviet Union and if the satellite countries could assert in the past that their Jews didn't want to emigrate, that after all they were citizens with full rights, and now that the Jews are under such attacks, I think that we are entitled to tell them, let our people go. We are willing to accept these cosmopolitans. We are willing to accept these so-called Zionists.
And this means that certainly many more Jews, if you are successful in this, many more Jews will be brought into Israel itself.
Yes, this is our intention. This is our determination.
Well, sir, that comes down to money, and that there have been several efforts to sell Israeli bonds in the United States. Now, are you in the United States in connection with that with the bond drive?
I am in connection with this drive because we have to strengthen Israel economically in order to permit it to absorb the many immigrants whom we want to bring to Israel.
And that can only be done with outside economic aid?
Only, or let us say mainly.
Well, I'm sure that our viewers have appreciated these expressions of yours, sir, and thank you for being with us.
The opinions that you've heard our speakers express tonight have been entirely their own. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Hardy Burt. Our distinguished guest was Dr. Arieh Kubovy, former Israeli minister to Czechoslovakia and Poland.